check for myself. I see so many examples of this. For instance, Alex Michael, the Flat Earth Man, in south of Spain where he lives, he's from Brighton, in south of Spain. What he did is that he started making observations from the coast, and he was seeing Mallorca and Minorca and the islands, the Baleares Islands there, from the coast, and he took the measure and said, it's not possible. Shouldn't be there. That's it. It's over. You're not going to convince that guy it's a ball. It's just not going to happen after. He went for himself and proved he's not. Like I was just watching the other night, I was telling Jaron last night, some guy filmed sprites, which are these high elevation electrical events in high altitude, like 100 kilometers, from 400 kilometers away. Right? And that also shows that there should be a curvature there. You should be able to see all this stuff. But you know, this geometry. If you got space, you got video games, and you got films. They can show you space. You have gravity. If you want, you're in latch onto it. You spend weeks and weeks and weeks watching sci-fi, and you love it. You get totally enthralled. And what we see here is all these connections, right? We know this. It's great for flat earthers. It's just something to think about. We know all these things are connected, but the news is a culprit here because it gives legitimacy to what is being invented in the realm of video games, space, and NASA. So by coming out on the news with a lot of authority saying scientists are doing this and that, we know that they are also representing science sometimes. So many problems of communication because journalism is not fact-making. There's people writing something. And these are people that have biases, that have connections, that have jobs. It cannot be understood as no anthropologist, no first-year anthropologist is ever going to take the media for granted for what they're saying without considering that they work somewhere and somebody's paying the bills, there's advertisers, and everybody talks about this. Pierre Bourdieu's talked about this on his book On Television, I was just reading a couple of days ago online. So it's just common knowledge. That's why I'm not afraid to talk about it as an anthropologist. I don't think that people can even say anything about it. It makes perfect sense to be looking into these tensions between cosmologies, of course. And what we see now, what has been exposed, like I said, through Jeffrey Epstein, is the eugenics transhumanist apparatus and how they're buying people, using children for sex and selling them. And these are people who are buying all these scholars in Harvard, like Steven Pinker, is one of these celebrated genius, so-called imbeciles, in my opinion. So you get a lot of these guys. Right? They write these big books and they select from, this is kind of how it works. People don't deconstruct textbooks. It's something I've been doing for 15 years more. Like science textbooks, they put together by somebody who wants you to have certain kinds of facts. Obviously, they're filtering some other things out. And for the scholars, the people that write these big books, so-called, like all kind of big books, is for different reasons. Because biblion, megon, kakon. It's like a Greek saying big book is a big piece of crap. It's Kalimachean aesthetics, the idea that you don't need so much to say something.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. If
Smaller
you haven't done so already,
way, more relaxed way. But what you get is that these guys, they have a simplistic idea, so it's like guns, germs, and steel. Like here in Holland, they teach this in school. It's amazing. No anthropologist takes that seriously. It's trash. Jared Diamond has this book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. It's celebrated. It's got a Pulitzer Prize. You not find an anthropologist that thinks it's worth anything, but that's pushed everywhere. And the way it's put together is that it has a simplistic little reductionistic formula, and it goes around grabbing examples. It's the Procrustean bed. Procrustes was this character in mythology who was making people fit his bed. He was stretching them to make them fit his bed, doing violence to them to make them fit. It's kind of what you have with this because it's good money making. You get a publisher to promote that kind of book as some real serious history, and what it is that it supports this dominant eugenicist colonialist apparatus. So the people who do this kind of work of critiquing the stuff that makes up the dominant mainstream cosmology in academia, they're buried in bubbles within academia now because it's completely taken over by transhumanist funding. Like, we know this. Now, how does NASA do it? Probably we should end with this because we have only 8 minutes. And it's how they program the future for us. And here I'd just like to show you what they say about inspiration. Here I just selected some of the logics that they use, and I kind of brought them to us in this way. You know, they talk about inspiration, so they have to repeat that many times. It's all about America's leadership in space. It's this myth of science, exploration, technology. They say that the Apollo program was a revolution. It was a stunning demonstration that it demonstrates there was a fuel to the fire of the American consciousness, right? And you know, and they're going to show now in the future, they're going to go to the moon again to show the power of a unified purpose. And of course, they know that Apollo is all about catching the early young generations with this inspiration idea that makes them work and work and work for the country, right? Makes everybody more productive. Parents talk about this as a NASA being a jobs program. Makes a lot of sense, right? And they are so good that they want to extend their presence to the farthest corners of the universe. Because they touch every aspect of our lives with anything they do. It's part of the myth. Anything NASA does, they're doing for the best of everybody. And I'm not sure you've seen it. They had a Nestle did some research in the ISS to research the perfect cappuccino bubble. Because that's very important. That's in the European Space Agency website in the last month or so. Right? She's talking, that's the perfect bubble. She's like, it's amazing. And this is what they do. This is NASA. Like they draw on these ideas from the collective, sort of the Jungian Freudian sort of archetypes. That's why they get involved in baseball and Hollywood. And what you see here is that you even have this pyramidal kind of staircase thing going on. They have kind of a pyramid going on here. And I mean, some people over there would say, you know, that might be the dome. You see that people have represented is they can tell you, sometimes people say that they can tell you the truth of what they're showing you. Here, of course, they even have these baseball cards for the astronauts because they want to promote them as these icons, as idols, as heroes that in American world, when you go there, when I got there, all my friends had these collectible cards, rookie cards and stuff. Like Michael Jordan rookie card is worth a lot of money. It's like, what? It's a card? They're fascinated. Books and books of this stuff that they collect. So, and they know the statistics on this guy batted this much average, such a, who cares? What, baseball? Anybody outside the States it's trash. Like, who can watch baseball? It's so boring. I mean, if you say that to an American, they go crazy. Many of them, some of them are woken up to sports. Baseball, who's ever going to take the time to play that? It's actually something like that. But, okay, 6 minutes to go. We see here, well, sorry, here, yeah, we took care of that. So here we see, and then they continue, they give you all these blurbs. This is straight from NASA's website. Why are they doing it? More science. Moon is this treasure chest of science. Yeah? Apollo samples dramatically change the view of the solar system. You know they're taken from Antarctica, right? Anything they find changes dramatically everything. And then they tell you, as they told Iro, this geologist said, she was a teacher. I thought she was a student. I mean, she says, they teach her this today saying it all may completely change tomorrow. So we know science is changing. So that's your solid foundations. Okay, great. So, and then they're just scratching the surface of knowledge by going to the moon. They can take so much more money from this. It's like, this is just a tiny thing. We spend billions and billions and billions and we get, you know, we have a new story for the universe, but it's just scratching the surface. So you give us more money, we get another story. And then they're doing everything for everybody and people are starving. There's lots of people marginalized in poverty right now all around the world. But they're taking millions of dollars every day to present this story. And so the moon poles hold water, ice. This is the one that's crazy here. If you look there, if you can see it, it says ice represents power, power represents fuel, and fuel equals science. No, you can't make that up. It's just kind of like, you know it's written by the marketeers and production company, but ice represents power on the moon. That they think it's there, and it's tons, it's millions of tons. They're gonna access it. It's power, it's fuel, it's science. That's what science is. It's not what science is. It's not really what knowledge is for Aboriginal Indigenous people, for all over people all over the world before this technocratic kind of apparatus comes in and everything becomes about reducing things, turning them into resources, turning creatures into resources to be managed, turning lands and landscapes and plants into resources to be managed, that is something most indigenous people that still survive the onslaught of this so-called civilization are against. They don't believe animals are resources to be managed. Right? So, and then they continue with this. And I'm not going to bother you with the whole thing because we only have 3 minutes. But they even tell you, this is one, let's finish with this because it's amazing. They say that, and we have to actually read it here, exploration is in the DNA of our species, they say. The desire to discover and inhabit distant world, whether across earthly oceans or vast regions of space, it is critical to the continuation of our species. And this is what we're going to see here. This is transhumanism, perfect transhumanism. Right? Exploration is part of your DNA. The Earth is going to be destroyed anyway, so we need, it's imperative that we move to other planets. Only they can do it.
He's giving
right? It's critical to the continuation of our species that NASA goes somewhere else. And so we can have, they say, humanity must build a path to Earth-independent existence. It makes you wonder if they care so much about the Earth, right? They already given up on it. It's going to be destroyed, right? It's like that young the teenagers show up on UN and just crying, you know, we're heading to an extinction event that everybody's going to, let's do, but it's inevitable extinction, but we're going to do something. It's okay, it's inevitable extinction, let's all just die together, right? But they are telling us this, that they need to be doing this. They need to be going to, and they claim, of course, that their missions to the moon is sustainable. What's sustainable? They're from 1969 to 72, and then never again. And we look at their tent that they say is flying there, right? So what is sustainable about that? Now they say they destroy it. Of course, if people looked into this, they found Don Pettit saying they destroyed the technology from the 60s, and it's a painful process to build it back up. So they have an actor actually saying this, and who sounds kind of like has some problems, cognitive issues, but he's supposedly a genius. It's part of the inversion that we see going back all the way to Darwin, to Kepler, for instance, whose Latin is so terrible, it's barely readable. And people think it's an amazing science fiction story he wrote, this dream, it's called Somnium. And the Latin is this, for somebody like me who knows ancient Latin and poetry from the ancients, compared to the stuff from the 17th century, the supposed geniuses are like, what an idiot. But I mean, there's nothing to do about that, because if you read Cicero and Ovid and you look back and look at these guys, like, these guys are supposed to be smart. Okay. So here, yeah, of course, you give them, they have all these things. Oh, this is what they do. One of the things Jaron was talking about this the other day. This is an actual NASA expedition here. ISS, they drawing on Star Trek. There they have the Beatles covered. They're doing these posters all the time to promote themselves. And here, let's just finish with what they show you for reality. They want you to believe this is real, and this is where you get a little test to go. We have 30 seconds. Let's take a look at this wonder of science technology, lifting off from the moon's surface, and how its panels, the integrity, the engineering integrity of this amazing piece of technology is guaranteed. Here, let's take a look. That's the first one. Is the panels flap? Oh, are those panels flapping? Oh, that looks real. Oh, look at that. Oh, what's that? What's that thing that has like a prismatic thing? It looks like strings in different directions. I don't know. It's not. That's how it is on the moon. It's just like that. And look at that panel. When the lunar lander is taking off, look at that panel. That's how it's supposed to work. It's how it's supposed to work. It flaps in the wind of the moon vacuous moon wind. Is what we see in here. It's amazing. It's so real. And of course, from the Earth, with the remote control, if you wonder about that, they're pressing a button at NASA and making sure they do it at the right time so that they can follow this ship going up. Look at that. And you can show it many times. I show this for people who believe in moon landings, which is amazing. And they didn't know what they were looking at. So are those panels flapping? So I'll leave you with that because the time is up. And thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the many presentations that we have from great people that I've admired over the years and got to learn and want to know more about. So thank you very much.
that was Rodrigo's presentation. He's just literally finished speaking
right, I'm
now.
now going to bring up Paul, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give him a couple of minutes to set up. Wherever Paul is. That's good. Okay, I just do, there's a few people obviously have arrived since we started about the housekeeping, is that if they go out that door, the toilets are over the far right. I'm sorry for the rest of you. And if you go out this door, then
Hi,
the toilets,
Double.
the
Hi,
exit
Baba.
is actually to the left. I know that there's some people
Coffee
in the room,
Paul. Hello, my darling.
or at least one or two that are journalists. And we just
If
need
you haven't
to
done so
ask you
already,
to be,
please like and share to make more aware.
be supportive of the event, that the actual OBA theatre do not like, they do not want any photography or filming inside the theatre from themselves. So obviously we're filming it because we're actually doing it on behalf of the actual the event. But if you're a journalist, we ask you to have respect. If anyone does an interview with the journalist and they're filming you, we would ask you to go outside the building and hopefully not have the OBA in the background. The reason for it is that obviously the OBA and probably being associated with Flat Earth is something they don't want to do. So we want to be supportive of the event because we want to, possibly we may use it again, and two, we want the whole day to go without any hitch. I just want to mention about Paul.
Hi, everybody.
He's actually come over for a month. He's actually got family in Ireland, and when we actually asked him if he would like to speak at this convention, he was also talking to Robin about the UK.
Hi, everyone.
And we were trying to see if we could do this event 1 week after the other event, because we thought it'd be good for such things coming over from the pond, the other side of the pond, that they could piggyback quite easily. What it doesn't help is obviously there's people like yourselves that are going to try and go to two events. So what I'd like to do is that some of you in the UK and some of you here, well, all of you that are here today, I'd like to say a personal
David.
thank you
Hey,
to support the event, because the event isn't to do with
Anders is on a
always to do
plane.
with presentations. It's actually to do with the actual
Doc Michael,
getting us
Renty.
together. I mean, we've had a couple of days in the campsite, and we're having people that
Ted
met for
Summer.
the first time. I mean, it's just amazing for me that when people are online are keyboard warriors, all they want to do is talk about,
Hey,
what's the point of the
JJ.
convention? We don't gain anything more. There's nothing new to learn. One, that's rubbish. I mean, Rodrigo has just done a fantastic
Oh, my
presentation, as you will
Mark. Hi.
hopefully agree.
It's just gone
And,
10 a.m.
You're answering that. But basically, the convention is so much more. And like Karen here is putting on Oktoberfest, is it? Say.
Oktoberfest.
So that's happening in a couple of weeks in America. We've obviously got Dallas happening a couple of weeks, a couple of months after that. Or
Thanks
2
so
months
much,
from now.
everyone, for taking the time out
and
to tune in. As we
These
are
events
at the
are,
Amsterdam
there's a
Convention.
huge amount of work that you can probably imagine that goes into these, and the stress levels and the financial
Thanks,
costs.
Effie Mary.
And
Yeah,
that's
please
why
do
we
like
really
and
want
share
to
to
say
make
thank
more
you to
aware.
you really for being here, because it really makes it worthwhile. Are you ready, Paul?
I think so.
Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Paul. If you can please give him a round of applause. Thank you.
All right.
Hi, National
Thank you.
Memorial Gardens. Sending you big hugs.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
How do you do that?
Unthinking respect for authority is the
It's
greatest
cute.
enemy of truth. It's a quote that I think of often. My first 20 episodes of my podcast, I started with this quote. I thought it was really profound. A lot of what Rodrigo spoke about.
More than
Take the
welcome,
quote obviously a
everyone.
couple
Cheers,
different
Steve.
ways. Obviously, there's context to consider. However, let's just take it at pure face value. Who wouldn't agree with this sentiment? Misplaced trust in anything could be a recipe for disaster, and I think we can all agree on that. So who said unthinking respect for authority is the greatest enemy of truth? Albert Einstein. Which I find extremely ironic, as we'll touch on a bit later. So my presentation here this morning is going to, the plan is I'm going to skim the surface of 7 topics that are, I feel, persistent in the overall conversation when it comes to this discussion of the shape of the world, and used often by defenders of a globular Earth, often as appeals to authority, unthinking respect for the perceived authority that is. So this is not meant to be an exhaustive analysis on each topic
Yep, we've got Paul on the plane
whatsoever, but
speaking
simply
right
to
now.
give you
He's
a
giving
taste
a
of what
grand
many on the
presentation.
globular Earth side
One that he's
of
not
the
done at a
conversation
convention
attempt to
before.
use as so-called proofs of a globular
So,
Earth, and why I
level
think those
things are
arguments
ready.
don't hold
Sit
water.
back and relax and enjoy.
I'm running out of space up here.
Sorry.
So this presentation, again, not intended to be evidence for and certainly not proof of the flat Earth, but more of a high-level analysis of alleged globe Earth proofs. What I've found they are actually based on, and why I think they are pointless for anyone to try and defend a globular Earth theory. Hence why I call them gobbledygook. I'm not sure if it's a term that is used on this side of the Atlantic
As I said
Ocean, but
before,
I use
if you
it
haven't
often
done so
in
already,
States
please
when I
like and
refer to
share to make
gibberish.
more
And I
aware.
think the origin is
whatever
referring to the
platform you
sound
wish
that
to do
turkey
so.
makes. So before we dive into these 7 topics, I kind of felt compelled in any situation like this to make a few requests based on my experience in seeing how the media handles these sort of gatherings or these sort of events. So if you're seated in this auditorium and you're a journalist and you're covering this event, I'm not sure if there are any in here or not. But first off, we would appreciate if you would not make any reference to or even mention the Flat Earth Society. Personally, I'm not associated with this group, and I do not believe anyone here is either. When we see articles covering events such as this, the Flat Earth Society is often mentioned, and it just reveals how lazy the journalism was, as Rodrigo mentioned. Somebody simply Googled Flat Earth and looked at the few links at the top of their search engine results, and this is what they come up with. So we believe the Flat Earth Society is controlled opposition. If you don't know what that means, look that up. I think they mix a little bit of truth in with a portion of outlandish claims, so that at first glance you're compelled to dismiss the entire idea quickly, all the while thinking you've actually done some research. Trust me, you haven't. We know that if you spend time actually researching this topic, you'll be sucked in. So the idea is that you Google Flat Earth, end up on the Flat Earth Society page, and see something that you will laugh and move on quickly. Secondly, there's no one here that believes that we live on a pancake or a pizza floating in space, so please do not include these sort of images in your article because it's disingenuous and does not represent our findings or beliefs in the least. Next, no one here believes the Earth is moving upward at 9.8 meters per second squared, which causes us to experience something akin to gravity. We do not believe the Earth is moving in any way, shape, or form, period, paragraph. And finally, please stop asking, where's the edge? We believe the world's oceans are surrounded by Antarctica, which is like the shoreline of a lake. So when I get that question, I usually respond, can you fall off a lake? So please do not, of course you can, so please stop asking if you can fall off the Earth. And do yourself and all of us a favor and research the Antarctic Treaty. You'll begin to understand why we all are piling in a boat this weekend and heading to Antarctica to see what lies beyond. We are unable to travel independently below the 60th parallel and must not only have our own government's permission, but all of the permission of the governments that have land claims in Antarctica. There are no motorized vehicles allowed, no sled dogs, and you have to bag your own urine and feces. The Antarctic Treaty alone should cause you to question the motives of the world's governments if you dare to look into it. And one final point, while I'm on the subject of Antarctica, no, we are not planning a cruise there next year. If you Google Flat Earth Cruise, you still come up with hundreds of headlines making that claim, and that was never the plan. One media outlet got it flat out wrong, and hundreds of other media outlets simply copied that story and didn't practice any due diligence and just ran with it. All that being said, if you are a journalist attending this convention, first of all, thank you for being here. We hope you represent the organizers, the speakers, and attendees respectfully, and most importantly, we hope you represent them accurately. My rant is over. All right, let's get going. As I mentioned previously, going to touch on 7 topics that are persistent in the Flat Earth versus Globe Earth conversation used by defenders of the globular Earth with unthinking respect for authority. And here they are. Number 1, the Earth is a pair. Number 2, radius or R of the Earth. Distance to the Sun, the shrinking Sun, Coriolis effect, gravity, and gas pressure. All right, number 1. When it comes to the shape of our world, the idea that the Earth is not being a perfect sphere comes up often. Officially, we are told the Earth is an oblate spheroid, meaning it is a bit wider than it is taller, somewhere between 13 and 20 miles wider than it is taller, in fact. Therefore, difficult to tell by distant observation of the Earth's oblateness. Satellites, we're told, have to be about 22,000 miles away in order to see the entire disk at one time. Then we're faced with claims such as this meme, which suggests that if you take the highest resolution pictures that we get of the Earth, 121 megapixel files, 40 megabytes, from the Japanese weather satellite, the Himawari, and measure down to the individual pixel count and compare the width and height of the Earth, that it measures wider than it is taller, supporting the notion that the Earth is not a perfect sphere, but an oblate spheroid. There are 121 million pixels in these images. So I want to give thanks to moon researcher Dave Marsh, maybe you're familiar with him. He uses the same technique with special commercial software to measure the angular size of the moon using pixel width. And we verified that this meme is in fact correct in its measurements of the image of the Earth, and it seems to support the notion that the difference in the width and height of the disk is about 0.3%, which aligns with the WGS 84 model of the Earth, so somewhere around 13 to 20 miles wider than it is taller. So point for the globe, right? Well, not so fast. The problem is that the absolute widest point of the highest resolution images that we get are precisely the same number of pixels from the top of the image that it is to the bottom, meaning the absolute widest point of the Earth in these 120 million pixels is exactly midway between the north and south poles, directly on the equator. Let me restate that differently just to make sure you're getting this. The same measurements used to prove the Earth's oblateness confirm that the Earth's absolute widest point is straight through the center of the circle, or the equator. Can you guys see a problem with this? Let me play a short clip. Hopefully this will jog your memory. There's it. Oh, don't have the audio. Yeah. Yeah, I'm at 100% volume. Well, luckily the words are on the screen. I've got a couple other videos, so it's going to be important that we get the audio going for this. So this is Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about how the Earth is actually wider below the equator than it is above. That's what he states. That's where he comes up with his pear-shapedness. That's what he calls it, okay? So, it's slightly wider below the equator than it is above the equator, which is where his pear-shapedness comes from. So those high-resolution images of the Earth, which we are told are photographs of our world from 22,000 miles away, can be used to verify that the Earth is oblate, but they essentially debunk, then, the world's most famous and well-known astrophysicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, looked at as one of the foremost authorities on our universe by the general public, who says the Earth is wider below the equator than it is above. So let's talk about the world-renowned astrophysicist for a moment. To be fair, Neil is also known for his award-winning acting. Here's a list of his accomplishments from the Internet Movie Database. Did you know he's been nominated for Emmys and Grammys? And even was a Critics' Choice Television Award winner. We'll be picking on Neil quite a bit more this morning, so stay tuned for that. On a side note, regarding the Himawari images, they aren't really photographs anyway. As I've demonstrated previously in my Faking Space video series, in case you've not seen it, fakingspace.net, they are available free to stream or download directly from the website. What we found is that the weather patterns we see in the Himawari images are from combined local Doppler radar feeds and over land, and climate simulation weather patterns over the ocean. And software is used to wrap it around the Blue Marble Dataset 2.0 from NASA illustrator Robert Simon back in 2002. So it states right on the FTP file server of the Himawari images that the underlying land in the images is from the Blue Marble Dataset from 2002. Further, anyone can do a quick forensic analysis of any of the images that were given every 10 minutes from Himawari and see that they contain no noise and no ambient light, which absolutely must be present if these are real photographs. And then finally, speaking of Dave Marsh again, I wanted to mention this, if you haven't had a chance to see what he presented in at the UK conference 2 weeks ago, which I thought was fascinating. He's calculating the angular size of the moon using the same software that he did for the Himawari for me. And he's done this nearly a dozen times now. And these are a handful of the photos that he's captured with his Nikon P1000, all consistently capturing the moon with a 2,000 millimeter focal length. And what Dave is observing is that over and over again, that the moon always measures smaller on the horizon than it does at its zenith. And as it heads away from the observer, it gets smaller and smaller. This is extremely strong evidence that the moon is smaller and closer than what we've been taught. So great work, Dave. So the world's most recognized astrophysicist, the Himawari, and the mainstream moon narrative all being bumped in the same section. We're off to a good start. All right, we're going to move on to the radius or R of the Earth. The letter of the day, boys and girls, is the letter R. You remember that from Sesame Street. Whether the Earth is a sphere or an oblate spheroid, it must have curvature. All Earth curve calculators used to indicate the hidden height of an object below the Earth's alleged curvature at given distances based on the observer's height, obviously, and the elevation of the object is being observed. All require one essential piece of data in order to calculate the final result using geometry, and that is the radius of the Earth, or the R value. The R value is from the assumed center point of the globe, a location that no one has been to or can get to, it appears. The deepest hole ever dug into the Earth was approximately 8 miles, and that's about 3,950 miles short of where the alleged center of the Earth is. So the radius of the Earth has never been verified. Further, as we just established quite thoroughly, we're told the Earth isn't a perfect sphere anyway, it's oblate. This is a key point to understand, because if that were true, then the radius of the Earth would be unique for each observer and unique to the object that is being observed. There would not be one firm value of R for every observation. If the Earth is oblate, then there is no single value of R, therefore no set curvature, and otherwise an arbitrary or useless number. Now this becomes a big problem when you need an R value for things like Earth curve calculators. The most notorious, if you're not aware, most of you probably are, is the curve calculator created by Mick West on his metabunk.org website, which is favorited by proponents of a globular Earth. Last year, Mick West was taken to task by Nathan Oakley and Anthony Riley about this specific issue. Hope we've got the audio sorted here. The R value used in this in his very popular Earth curve calculator and the audio that was captured by the YouTube live stream was absolutely priceless. So let's see if we can give it a listen. And looks like it's not working.
So it looks like we're having a little bit of a sound issue at the moment. It looks like they're trying to get that sorted now. Paul was partly through his presentation.
Sorry.
So just bear with us. Hi Robin, hope you're doing okay, darling. Oh, go on, double. So we're just waiting for the sound to be fixed, and then Paul's going to carry on with his presentation. But so far so good, I'm enjoying it. I enjoyed Rodrigo's presentation as well. He had some good information there, especially for people that just come into it. So yeah, enjoying it so far. Will do, double. If you haven't done so already and you wish to do so and you want to support the tour as it disembarks from Amsterdam on Monday. We're going to be doing some activism in
While we're waiting for
Amsterdam
a couple of
tomorrow.
minutes,
Please
I just
do
thought
look
it
up
might be a good
further in
idea
the
if
chat, and you'll
anyone's
see the
got any
GoFundMe
questions
and
or anything
PayPal
they want
links
to
for
add
the
to what
tool.
we've seen so far. So
And if there's any mods
I
that
can
want to
bring the
share those
microphone
links in the chat room, that'd be
just,
greatly
we're just advising at
appreciated.
the moment. So anything? Okay, I'm going to do one thing. Say hello.
Hello, Gary.
I don't know if you noticed, but I actually asked her to say hello, Charlotte. So she's failed already. So anyway, is there any questions that anyone's got, or anything they want to, any thoughts, or you got something?
Yeah, I'd like to know.
Oh yeah, if you've got a loud enough voice, it's great. Thank you.
I'd like to know how many actual Dutch people are. Because so many.
Awesome.
I'm now going to speak to you in my best Dutch. Actually, I'm not going to speak to you in my best Dutch. Okay, speak. This is Mike from FE Core. He's going to say something to you.
What? I don't know.
Something?
What do you want me to say, Gary? Or want me to speak in Dutch so everybody here from the Netherlands understands? Oh, you're not needed.
Oh,
Okay.
dear.
Hey, no, sorry about the interruption, but basically when we did the UK last year, we had technical issues galore. So this time, we're really, really pleased to have the likes of William and Susie, and we've got a fantastic technical team here, and hopefully this is the only blip we're going to have. But anyway, I'll hand back to Paul, and thank you very much for being with us.
All right, sorry about that. Thank you for bearing with me. All right, we're left off with the audio from Anthony Riley and Nathan Oakley. Is Nathan here? Yeah, I thought he was here. This is classic. And Wix. So let's see if we can get this to come through.
By saying that it's based on an assumption. Do you still maintain that position? Well, it's the standard model. Sorry, the standard model has no scientific backing. It is an assumption, correct? What is the standard model? Sorry, the standard model has no scientific evidence. You only assume a value of R. Correct, Mick? Crying out loud.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So I wish they had like a video, you know, it would have been classic. We just got the audio, but it was classic. So yeah, he admits it. The radius of Earth is only an assumption. And make sure we're on the right slide. Over the years, there have been many different assumptive values for the size of the Earth, varying country by country, all with different assumptions of R. And if one models R value, let's say, is 1,500 meters, even 1,500 meters more than the other, this is the observed height, you know, higher or lower, and manipulates the alleged curve between the 2 points. So, you know, if each country's model comes up with a different assumptive value of R, there is no true R, you know, one R value for the globe, and the calculations derived from. And R is not only used for curve calculations, but also orbital distances of satellites from ground level. But as we'll see in a bit, it's used for calculating some very important distances within our solar system. But back quickly to Mick West, this is the same guy who called out Neil deGrasse Tyson, in fact, about how high you have to be to see the Earth's curvature. Did you guys see this?
That stuff is flat. That stuff is flat.
There you go. It's curved.
they made you look photograph him standing there with a really wide-angle lens, which curves horizontal lines. So in the photo, you see this curvature of Earth's surface. And you say, wow, he's in space. Look at that. No, he's not. At that height, you don't see the curvature of the Earth. If you are 2 millimeters above this beach ball, you just don't. That stuff is flat.
It's a pretty high production value, you know, all that stuff. Like Rodrigo was talking about, I mean, this is the world's a stage, and this is, you know, high, you know, the emotion that you get from watching him jump, you know, I mean, it's powerful stuff. But then you go on metabug.org, you know, Mick West's website, and he calls out Neil and says, you know, we can observe curvature as low as 45,000 feet. So he flat out says the world's leading, you know, astrophysicist is flat out wrong. You know, I mean, I find the double speak here, you know, nothing reconciles. You know, if this were all true, it would all reconcile. But, you know, obviously we got to mention that there are many videos online, I'm sure many people have seen that, of high altitude moon footage in excess of, you know, way above 100,000 feet, showing no curve, as long as you're using a rectilinear lens, which produces little to no barrel distortion, or the so-called fish eye effect. So I have to say, Neil, we're probably with you on this one. Unthinking respect for authority, again, is the greatest enemy of truth. So let's move on to number 3. The distance to the sun. And I have a little bit of a delay, so I'm running late here. For those of you who heard my story, I started my truth journey investigating the images of the Earth from space, which led me to the production of my Fake Space video series, where I offer a forensic analysis of the images and show the anomalies, the lack of continuity, again, lack of reconciliation, chicanery, in other words, of the World Space Agency is trying to pass off CGI as real photographs. But after going down that rabbit hole, so to speak, I dived more into space topics such as the distance to the stars, how that's derived, other planets, and our sun. And what I found was, when it came to these most important topics, essential to modeling our world, our solar system, the galaxy, you know, the universe, etc., it was all assumptive based. So the bottom line for me was, you know, so-called scientists who, you know, worked out how this all works appear to use a logical fallacy called circular reasoning. And that's how they make all the math to work out. When the math works out, then it must be true, right? I mean, that's what we're told. And that's the deception. This method became really obvious to me when I looked into how they calculated the distance from the Earth to the sun. And first off, the distance to the sun has been calculated to be quite different over the centuries, showing that the so-called scientific community had to keep working on the assumptions that they were making and working out the math to make sure that it all lined up. NASA's astronomical figures sound perfectly precise, but heliocentrists have historically been notorious for regularly and drastically changing the numbers to suit their various models. For instance, in his time, Nicholas Copernicus calculated the sun's distance to be about 3.3 million miles away. The next century, Johannes Kepler decided it was about 12.3 million. Isaac Newton was once quoted as saying, "It matters not whether we reckon it 28 or 54 million miles, for either would do just as well." That's pretty scientific. Benjamin Martin calculated between 81 and 82 million. Thomas Dilworth, 93.7. John Hind, 95.2, positively 95.2. And Benjamin Gould said more than 96 million. And then the one that looked like the most was Christian Meyer. He said that's about 104 million. Quoting from Thomas Winship's book, Zetetic Cosmology, if I can say that, 1899. As the sun, according to science, may be anything from 3 to 104 million miles away, there is plenty of space to choose from. It is like the showman and the child. You pay your money for various astronomical works, and you take your choice as to what distance you wish the sun to be. And if you're a modest person, you just go in for a few million. But if you wish to be very scientific and be mathematically certain of your figures, then I advise you to make your choice somewhere around 100 million. You will at least have plenty of space to retreat into should the next calculation be against the figures of your choice. You can always add a few million, you know, here and there to keep up with the times, or take off as many as you may be required to adjust the distance to the very latest accurate column of figures. Talk about ridicule. The whole of modern astronomy is like a farcical comedy full of surprises. One never knows what monstrous or ludicrous absurdity may come forth next. You must not apply the ordinary rules of cosmology. This is how they calculate the distance from the Earth to the Sun. Scientists observed Venus transiting the Sun. Now, the transits of Venus are very, very rare. They occurred in a pattern that repeats every 243 years, with pairs of transits 8 years apart, separated by gaps of 121 and 105 years. So on average, about every 113 years. The next one, coincidentally, will be in the year 2117. So they determined the distance from Venus to the Sun by using the speed and the size of Venus's orbit around the Sun. Okay? They assumed Venus and the Earth to be of the same size. That was the first assumption they made. And then they were able to determine the distance of Venus to the Sun by determining the speed and size of Venus's orbit around the Sun. Does that compute? Because that's the circular reference again. So then they used that data to determine that Venus's distance to the Sun was about 3/4 of the distance of the Earth to the Sun because of the size of the Sun. But they calculated the size of the Sun based on the distance of the Earth to the Sun. Circular references abound. And the underlying data that they used to base all these calculations was an assumption that the Earth is an oblate spheroid with a circumference based on their absolute 100% ironclad, measured and validated radius of the Earth. I recommend checking out Gerard Hickson's 1922 book, Kings Dethroned, if you have not read it, in which he breaks down methodically and irrefutably, in my opinion, how many assumptions were made in coming up with these astronomical distances between celestial bodies. If even one of these assumptions are slightly off, the entire model is going to be wrong. They cite Johannes Kepler's third law of orbital mechanics often. Kepler, who said that the Sun was 12 million miles away.
Hi to everyone.
But here's the kicker where the deception is. You need to know either the size of the object or the distance to that object to figure out the other figure using geometry. But they calculate one using the other. It's completely a circular reference. No actual measurements have been or ever will be taken to validate either one. Quote, today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments and wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality. I think Nikola Tesla said it best. Now, I don't know if you guys saw this. The Sun might actually be bigger than we originally thought. What does that do to all the math that we've been given, that we're told proves the cosmos? What you'll find as you dig in is that the universe is an assumptive-based model built on a mathematical construct that only works because of logical fallacies such as circular reasoning. There is no verification of any of the assumptions that are made, only explanations built to make up the pieces of the puzzle. And these assumptive figures that are worked out mathematically are taught to the world as fact. There's no true science behind any of it whatsoever. Again, the unthinking respect for authority is the greatest enemy of truth. All right, number 4, I'm trying to move quickly through these. The shrinking sun. The staunch defenders of the globe think they are having a field day with those of us that do not accept the claim that our sun is 93 million miles away, because they state that we don't see the sun change in angular way. Well, that argument that the sun's size does not change, therefore it's massive and far away, is an informal fallacy called a straw man. It is based on an assumption that the sun is a physical object with an actual and verifiable position, which obviously we just covered in point number 3. The globe defender belief is that the sun is 93 million miles away. Light travels 186,000 miles per second. Therefore, the light we are receiving from the sun originated from the sun 8 minutes ago. We're not seeing the actual sun in the sky. We're seeing an apparent sun. This is also the argument they use to explain sunsets. The apparent sun is seen by us as setting, but the real sun is already below the horizon due to the distance of the sun and because of atmospheric refraction. Logic, we're seeing an apparent, not actual sun, location of the sun. We can only measure the angular size of the sun from our location here on Earth. And that angular size would only be apparent, again, not actual, to the individual observer at their own unique location, and the horizon is also an apparent, not actual location too. So I think it bears repeating, apparent location where the sky meets and touches the land or water. So the horizon is different to each observer. The height of the observer and weather conditions obviously vary, and we have an apparent horizon. The horizon is not an actual location anyone can go, but defenders of the globe reify the horizon to be the solid leading edge of a spherical Earth, claiming that celestial objects going beyond that location are below your observer location, i.e. the sun. So in summary, if we can keep all of their arguments in line, the globe defender's argument would actually be broken down as, their question would be, why don't we see the apparent size of the apparent sun change when looking at the apparent position of the sun disappearing at an apparent location of the horizon? I think everybody sees how silly that would be. Science will need to provide, first of all, evidence that the sun is a physical object at the distance that they say it is, and the size that they claim it is. And as we've discussed already, this has not happened and will not happen. Shifting gears to the moon real quickly, attempts to measure the distance of the Earth to the moon are common amongst the defenders of the globe as well. They use an assumed curved Earth, of course, based on the assumptive arm value to calculate their angles, using two different locations and solving for the leading edge of a triangle using geometry. They have to use a known size of the moon to do so, what mainstream science maintains to be about 2,000 miles in diameter, and they come up with two and assume that all that is true, then the same must hold true for the distance of the Earth to the sun, because the sun and the moon are identical size. When the assumed size of the sun is added to the calculation, 864,000 miles is what we're told, so the math cranks out 93 million miles. But as I've already covered, they came up with the size of the sun based on the distance to the sun using circular reasoning. No wonder the math always works. Just remember this, you need the distance to get the size, or you need the size to get the distance. They have neither, so they use circular reasoning to build a mathematical construct, and thinking respect for authority will always be the greatest enemy of truth. All right, we're going to move on to number 5, Coriolis effect. We're told that the Earth spins on its axis approximately every 24 hours. This is why we have day and night, right? Well, we can model the day and night on a flat model of the Earth. So what else is there? Well, the defender of the globe will say, you idiot, didn't you go to school? You must have flunked science, and you forgot about the Coriolis effect, which is the pattern of deflection, here's the definition, taken by objects not firmly connected to the ground as they travel a long distance around and above the Earth. The Coriolis effect is responsible for many large-scale weather patterns. It's also why Foucault's pendulum does this, we're told. The pendulum is set in motion very carefully to avoid introducing any sideways motion, usually by tying it back with a thread of cotton and slowly burning the end of it with a candle, without any outside input. Of course, it's actually the Earth that is spinning or rotating underneath the pendulum, which is why it continues to swing in the same plane relative to the rest of the universe. So that's how it works. So let's dive into this effect called Coriolis, which allegedly is evidence that the Earth is spinning on its axis. For there to be a Coriolis effect, you must have two reference frames: the Earth, a non-inertial rotating reference, and then the air, or anything not attached to the Earth, an inertial, non-rotating reference. So the Coriolis effect can be demonstrated, as you can see here, by throwing a ball while on a rotating roundabout or merry-go-round, etc. Reference frame, which is spinning. When the person throws the ball travels in a straight line, leaving the first reference frame and going into the second reference frame, which is the non-inertial reference frame. Although the ball is moving in a straight line, it appears to deflect or curve in relation to the observer, who is in the first frame of reference. Now, the following are example observations that we are told are caused by the spin of the Earth, and otherwise hurricanes, typhoons, toilet water, I've been told, because it goes this way, in parts of the world, and then it goes this way in other parts of the world. And then footballs are also affected by Coriolis.
Wow. And I said,
are susceptible to the Earth's spin, but airplanes, helicopters, drones, hot air balloons are not. If the Coriolis effect with respect to the Earth is real, take for example a commercial flight from Charlotte, North Carolina to Los Angeles, California. They both sit about 35 degrees north latitude, where the Earth is allegedly spinning at 860 miles per hour. When the plane takes off and travels 500 miles per hour to the west, plus you add in the rotation of the Earth coming towards the plane at 860 miles an hour, that's about 1,360 miles per hour that the plane would be covering. It would be a very significant amount of ground in a very short period of time. The flight would be something like 90 minutes to cover that distance. But in reality, the flight takes approximately 4 hours. And the flight time is generally the same in both directions, but the plane would have to fly considerably faster east than it would to the west because Charlotte is traveling. And it left the first frame of reference and entered the second frame. In actuality, the only reason there's a slight difference in flight time is because generally planes flying west are headed into the wind and have tailwinds when they're heading east. So their average speeds in each direction will vary. And then what about the only way similar flight times in all geographic directions are possible on a spinning globe is if the atmosphere is stuck to the rotating globe, which is what we are taught, exactly that. But this asserts that there's only one reference frame, not the two reference frames that are absolutely vital for Coriolis to even be considered. So mainstream science's own admission is that there is no Earth-based Coriolis possible. When you Google, why can't I feel the Earth, spinning, why can't I feel it, chasing the sun and orbiting around the sun, you get this explanation. The atmosphere is stuck to the Earth. How convenient. So when it comes to pendulums, hurricanes, typhoons, toilet water, and kicked footballs, the Coriolis effect is there to expose missiles, bullets, airplanes. It does warrant pointing out, obviously, that snipers, long-range missile operators, and the like reportedly do not account for the spin of the Earth, or curve for that matter. We have many ex-military personnel, long-range gunners, etc., who have stated plainly that there's only two dials on their scopes, one for elevation and one to adjust for the wind. There is no adjustment for latitude or direction, north, south, east, west, which would need to be factored in when determining the speed of the projectile and its relation to the Earth spinning underneath it when it left the gun and how long it was in the second frame of reference. Now, to hammer this point home, watch this demonstration 2 minutes, landing almost precisely where it was shot from. If the Coriolis effect were a real thing and the Earth was spinning, then this bullet should have landed approximately 21 miles away. This video was edited slightly for time constraints. I would run too. I think this was a 50 caliber. Slow down the sound there. It sounds like a helicopter. One minute, 50 seconds in the air. And you're landing almost in the same spot. All right, I think we've hammered that point home enough. So number 6, and I'm going to try and crank through these in 5 minutes. The number one proof of a globe that we are often presented with is obviously gravity, or the theory of. Apparently solves all the problems of the heliocentric model, but those of us who question it bring to the table. Gravity is used to explain how trillions of gallons of ocean water can stay stuck to a spinning globe, how the air pressure system we enjoy here on Earth is kept from expanding into the ultra-low pressure of infinite, never-expanding space, and at the same time keeps the Earth and the Moon chasing the Sun perfectly in a corkscrew pattern at almost 500,000 miles per hour. But like most beliefs in globular models of the Earth, there's not just one accepted explanation. So Isaac Newton is credited as being the father of gravity. He gave us the world's Newton's universal law of gravitation. Whereas he described that all mass attracts other mass and can be calculated using this famous formula that he's credited with, where big G is Newton's universal constant of gravity. But here's the interesting thing. Newton didn't even mention this universal constant of gravity, or G, in his famous 1687 publication, Principia Mathematica, in which he publishes his major work, including Newton's 3 laws. In fact, there was no formula or equation published in the Principia for the universal law of gravitation. And as was the ways of the day, Newton described his newfound law using just words. And I quote, "The principle of universal gravitation, namely, that every particle of matter is attracted by, or gravitates to every other particle of matter with a force inversely proportional to the squares of their distance." Again, quoting Newton himself. Newtonian gravity was said to be, and taught to, at least myself, as proven science. Most people today, and the bigger the mass, the more the attractive force, as we'll see in this clip in a few moments. When we're told that this was proven science, it implies the empirical scientific method was used. So we apparently observed the natural phenomena of mass attracting mass. The cause of this observed effect, we are told, is due to the mass of the object, which leaves us with an hypothesis that would state, if mass, then mass attracts mass. And this is pseudoscience. Effects cannot be the cause in the scientific method. This is called, again, circular reasoning. But wait, globular Earth proponents have a lifeline for gravity. Newtonian gravity isn't the only accepted explanation for gravity anymore, where we are told it's not even an actual force. But you can think of it as a force, as George Musser, a contributing editor for Scientific American magazine, said recently in an interview. He said, "Gravity isn't a force, but you can think of it as a force." And this is why I call it gobbledygook. Albert Einstein's theory is a concept only and can never be seen or measured. So Newton's law of gravitation is often interchanged with Einstein's when working out a physical force. You can work out the trajectory of throwing a ball and see it and test it with Newton's laws, but you can't with Einstein's. Without G, there's no physical force to be able to deal with. This asserts that even when something is at rest, like a cup on a table, it's still experiencing force. Einstein's theory of general relativity has emerged as the consensus of what gravity actually is, the bending of the conceptual medium of space-time, giving rise to a pseudo-force called gravity. So let's let, again, the world's most recognized astrophysicist enlighten us all. Newton was trying to describe the effect of gravity as a force we observe with a mathematical relationship in 3 dimensions, length, width, and height. Whereas Einstein superseded this with inventing the bending of a concept that can only exist in one's imagination. It manifests in 3 dimensions with the addition of the 4th imaginary dimension of time. The closest thing you'll find as far as demonstrations of Einstein's gravity is a trampoline with a bowling ball sitting on it, sagging in the middle. However, this is also demonstrating gravity as an actual force, and objects released from the trampoline obviously just sag straight to the bowling ball, and it's called science. But, unfortunately, sorry Newton and Einstein, you're soon to be replaced. There's a new kid on the block, black holes, which apparently are debunking both Newton and Einstein. And don't worry, we used to think the sun was only 3 million miles away, so how foolish were we? Unthinking respect for authority is the greatest enemy of truth. All right. We are told that the air pressure in outer space is immeasurable, right? Mainstream science maintains that there's 2 differing air pressure systems existing next to each other without a physical barrier. So at sea level we measure about 14.7 pounds per square inch. But once you're far enough away from Earth, the pressure drops down to way less than 1 pound per square inch, way less in fact. It's estimated down to way less than 1 pound per square inch, way less in fact. It's estimated to be 1 × 10 to the negative 17 torr, basically unmeasurable. Now if we go to our college science textbooks to see how we define pressure,
It says pressure is a force exerted by the substance per unit area on another substance. And here's the key line, which I've underlined. The pressure of a gas is the force that the gas exerts on the walls of its container. When you blow into a balloon, the balloon expands because the pressure of your molecule is greater on the inside of the balloon than on the outside. Pressure is a property which determines the direction in which mass flows. If the balloon is released, the air moves from a region of high pressure to a region of low pressure. Who better than a professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, explain it simply for us?
Over here is going to be vacuum of equal volume, and we're going to remove the air. You know what's going to happen spontaneously, right? The gas is going to fill the available volume once it becomes
Available, the gas fills it. You remove the barrier, the gas fills all available space. Apparently, our world exists differently, however. The two differing air pressure systems existing next to each other without a physical barrier defies two natural laws. The first is the second law of thermodynamics, which states that high pressure immediately and often violently flows to low air pressure, filling the container. This means that the air on Earth could never exist, like the moon supposedly, because the low pressure of space would never let it form without a container. This leads many to hypothesize that the Earth is a closed system, which allows for this air pressure system that we enjoy to actually exist. And the other law that it breaks is Boyle's gas law. This law states that as you increase the volume of a container, you decrease the pressure within that container. This is illustrated very well by how our lungs work. We don't suck air into our lungs, we create a low pressure inside our chest by using our diaphragm muscle to increase the volume of our lungs, which decreases the air pressure by expanding the container, our lungs, and as Boyle's gas law demands, the higher air pressure must immediately flow to the low air pressure system, achieving equalization. But there's a pressure gradient, we're told, that's what the law of the Earth will say. Well, I would say that pressure gradients can indeed exist in a container. This can be demonstrated by filling an enclosed container with different types of gases. Different densities, the heavier, more dense gas will settle at the bottom, and the lighter one will find its equilibrium near the top of the closed container. This would be strong evidence to suggest that a pressure gradient can indeed exist in a container with a lid and enclosure. In fact, there's a YouTuber by the name of Good Times for All on YouTube. His name is Zachary Zavala. He demonstrated a pressure gradient in as little as a 10-pound tank in a video that he did earlier this year. Imagine if we were able to build a container with a lid many miles high and many miles wide. I would submit to you that if we were able to measure the air pressure at the top of the container compared to the pressure reading at the bottom of the closed container, we would find a significant difference, one that would correlate with our reality. And if we can demonstrate it in a container like Zach's, that small, that he did in his demonstration, the evidence that we live in an enclosure of some sort is very strong. What mainstream science is essentially asking us to do is to suspend our understanding of the natural laws that govern our world. When considering how our world was created, how it was formed, we need to just accept that the cosmos is not governed by the natural laws that exist here on Earth. Unthinking respect for authority is the greatest enemy of truth. Mainstream science cannot model or demonstrate their claims, but we can model and demonstrate how the laws of nature work any day of the week. Michio Kaku, professor of theoretical physics at the City College community, is faring when it comes to gaining an understanding of our cosmology. This clip from the movie The Principle, I think, really puts an exclamation point on my presentation today. Factor that they admit that they're off in understanding our cosmology. I want to thank you very much for your time. Sorry I had to go through the last bit of that a little bit fast. I want to really quickly invite you to listen to my podcast, Don't Mind for Paul and Mitch, available on most major platforms. And a big thanks to Mitchell, my co-host, because he helped me put this together. And Truth Frequency Radio Show with Roxanne. Roxanne, are you here? There she is. Every Wednesday night here in GMT 1 a.m. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, my email, paul@paulmcclain.com. I'd love to hear from you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the convention. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
I must admit, I didn't actually see all of Paul's presentation, but the bit I did see, I thought it was really good, but then I'm a little bit biased because I love these guys. We are now going to bring up Iru, but as with Paul, we need a couple of minutes just to actually let them get set up. One of the things that I've actually been thinking about for a little while is that with the equator, we're meant to be moving at 1,040 miles an hour, and in the UK, that I obviously recognise, being told it's about 630 miles an hour. And basically, when you actually have the spin, that with this moon, it's meant to be moving at 15 feet per second. And if you take it that where the moon landed, that Paul was showing on video, let's assume it's only a third of that, and it's only moving at 5 feet. So where I look at it is that when the moon landed went up,
I'm going to come back for the charger.
2 seconds later, it would have moved 10 feet. But when you look at it, it looks like it's gone straight up. So I always question that. So anyway, Iru,
between Rodrigo and Paul, who've just given 2 presentations. Personally, I really enjoyed them. There was some brilliant information there. I hope you were able to see and hear it properly. I've just come outside the theatre so that you guys can hear me speak. I don't want to speak over Gary as he's talking inside the arena. No bud break. Just literally a few minutes while they get set up before Iru starts talking. And this is outside in the lobby area. You've probably seen it on Adam's stream yesterday, because I think Adam did a little stream yesterday where he kind of showed everyone the venue. So if I walk you around here, you'll be able to see, and then I'll go back inside the arena. Can you all hear me okay? I'm going to give a shout out in the chat room in a second. I'll go back in the other side. So this, I believe, is Dee here at the desk. How you feeling? You good? You happy so far?
I'm happy, but I would like...
You still awaiting any guests?
Good idea.
Are you still awaiting guests?
Yeah, we're getting people coming in.
Really? Late arrivals?
Yeah. A lot of people buying at the door.
Ooh!
Yeah, I think about 10 people.
Big thumbs up from Dee. Dee's got a smile on her face today. This is a good look.
Tired smile.
A tired smile, but a smile nevertheless.
The most delicious cook I've ever smelled.
Ooh, good stuff. All right, my darling.
See you later,
See you in a bit. So Dee's a happy girl. I think in there is where we're going to grab something to eat a little bit later. I don't think we've got that much time just now, but in here is where we're going to get something to eat. Hey, Robin. Oh, something does smell nice. Like, really nice. So, I am going to go back into the arena. I need to use the girls' room. So,
I spent a few years really thinking on hard at that.
you know what? I'm going to go inside. Actually, don't really want to walk across the stage. I'll just go around this way. I am indeed, yeah. So look, I'll just go this way. Make it a bit long for myself. I think we're on the 6th floor of this building. The escalators go all the way down to the bottom. And yeah, it's a really nice building. It's nice and warm. And yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to be able to see. Be able to see. Yeah. So I'm going to go back into the arena now. It is, JJ. It's a cool place. It's nice and roomy.
Still go for 1 hour approximately, and then we'll get a break for lunch. I will come up and just say a good 2 seconds after
Okay, can you do me a favour? Can you hold my phone while I just go to the bathroom?
Hello.
Hello everyone, thank you for being here, and thank you Dee, Gary, and all the people involved in the organization of this event. It's not easy, as you know, so thank you for bringing me here, and thank you for all the people in the community that support me to be here today. For me, it's not easy. Came from Argentina, and
So I really appreciate all the people that support me. I hope you understand my English. Maybe I'm gonna invent some words in the fly, but because my presentations are mixed a little bit between science, so this time is not gonna be different. So I'm gonna make like an holistic view of my perspective on the flat Earth, because for me, right now, after 5 years of being a researcher and a lot of people putting calculations and observations and experiments and out there for everyone to look at, it's very easy to understand that the Earth is flat and stationary plane. Yeah, you don't need more than study the mechanics of the fluid and make some observations and science to know that something is wrong. There are people that are lying to us all the time in other situations of the life, like the sports, even there are corruption out there in any directions we look. So there is no, it's difficult to understand that we've been told lies all our life. But for me, it's really important to understand the foundations of our scientific, institutions and so for anyone who wants to new to the flat Earth and want to at least have some principal points to understand why we believe that the Earth is a stationary plane, I recommend this kind of observations, experiments, and the first one are related with the motion of the Earth, the four first ones. Then we have a few other for understanding our Big Bang cosmology. We have also mechanisms to understand how in the antiquity, the cosmology, the science of the antiquity, measure our sky, our movement in the sky. The Antikythera mechanism is one of the device for me, one of the most important device to understand long-range laser test, the long-range observation with infrared lenses like that is amazing. The high-altitude balloon cameras, the long-distance microwave and radio wave, our senses, of course, that will be nice to pay attention, because sometimes the modern science start to take up our senses and supposedly they lie to us. So that is why we create instruments to try to contrast our senses. And when our senses and the instruments detect the same thing, that is something to take into account very seriously. For example, like the rotation of the Earth. The J-Toller media, for me, made one of the best observations of long-distance objects, or if we live in a sphere of 12,000 kilometers. Some of these observations take place more than 400 miles to the horizon, and supposedly at that altitude, at 10 kilometers from a plane, we only see 350, 100 kilometers to the horizon. And this is, like we see in his videos, you can clearly see the horizon even continue behind the mountains. So that is more an evidence that we live in really big plane, and the horizon is always at eye level than the sphere of the size that the science priests give us. So I just pointed attention, but I know that there is maybe new people to this, and this could be, just a starting point to understand why we don't believe that we live in the sphere. And I say believe because for everyone out there is a belief. Nobody is an astronaut, nobody go into the space. So if you want to believe that for me it's okay. We have a long distance observation also in Argentina, which defied the globe measurement from Uruguay. You can see a lot of buildings to Buenos Aires that supposedly we have 54 kilometers away the coast of Uruguay to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and there is almost 200 meters of curvature. And if you research how many buildings are more tall than that height, we don't have even one. So of course, you at least you must have just the tip of the building, of the most highest. Like for example, this tower is not yet finished, but supposedly it's going to measure 200 meters. But the rest of the building, that's the tallest building in Buenos Aires, are these only 10 to 12 buildings, and all the height is 172 meters. Only 12 to 13 buildings to see, and for example this, and I put some contrast filter to see, but you can see clearly that we see a lot of buildings more than supposedly the observations allow, and this is just a regular guy filming from 3 meters height from the coast, and if you do the math, this is not possible, because here, in fact, you can clearly see that is here image. Of course, the building are cut off because perspective, because the air layers, how the light behave in the medium of the earth. But you can clearly see, if you start counting, you're gonna see more than 30 buildings, and most of them, they are not even in the coast of Buenos Aires. It's deep inside the city. So this kind of observation for me, it's crucial to here knows the Joshua wiki observation work, how it's not the curvature of the air that is changing, it's just how the light or how the objects behave when you look through air. It's just that, it's not based on curvature. I'm not going to spend so much time in this, but we can reproduce that on lab. For example, at the top of here, in the left top corner, you can see how this nanotube of carbon, they are just changing the temperature of that, and you can see how like invisible, or you can bring it back to the view, and that is what happened with the air and the light, if you want to see it that way. So we have all these kind of phenomena that explain why we don't see sometimes infinity into the distance. It's just a matter of the climate, weather, the climate conditions, and how these phenomena interact with this layer of air. So I can spend more time in this. Sorry for my fast presentation.
Okay guys, my battery is running low, so I'm going to have to go and charge it for a while. If you want to go and carry on watching
but
the
like I
live
tell you
stream,
before, for me it's more important how
Jason
we
of the Disc
receive our
channel.
education.
He's about to
And for
start
that,
live streaming now.
I'm going to
That
start
is Jason
via
of the Disc
UNESCO
channel
because
on YouTube.
along the way you're
Click
going to
to
see
pay
that we
and he's
are
about to start
being
live streaming.
like
See you all
someone
soon.
spell, like spell on us, because